Okay, today I am joined by Jim McCormick of Cast Nylons. Hello, Jim.
Hello, Blake. How's it going?
It's going good. So thanks for joining me today. And why don't you give us a little bit of an idea of where you came from, how you got into plastics, and how you ended up at Cast Nylons?
Okay, well, I've been in the industry for about 35 years. My three primary career stops. First one, I was vice president of sales and marketing for what today is known as 3A Composites. Back when I was there, it was under many names: Alu-Swiss Composites, Alcan Composites. Basically, though, we were more known by our brand names: Sintra, Foam Core, Foamex, Gator Foam, Kappa, Alucobond, D-Bond. Those products, which are still quite prevalent out there today in the signage and display market. That really was my first major entree into the IAPD industry. Most of the channel partners I have today, I've known for 30, 35 years, going back to my time with Alu-Swiss Composites, 3A Composites. After a 16-year stint with them, I transitioned to go to work for Cope Plastics. I live in St. Louis. Cope Plastics corporate headquarters is Godfrey, Illinois, which is the St. Louis area. So it was nice to work for somebody that was in my backyard, so to speak. With 3A Composites, the corporate headquarters were originally in Kentucky. Well, originally in St. Louis, and then they moved to Kentucky, and then they moved to Charlotte. So it was very fortunate for me to join Cope Plastics. And that was really my first exposure in 2004 when I joined Cope to the mechanical industry. Up until that point, I'd been in the plastics industry, but it was all graphics, signage, screen printing, digital printing, trade show exhibits, visual merchandising type applications, high velocity, short order cycle. Repeat business, and very, very, very competitive. The mechanical business is different. When I joined Cope, which is dominated by mechanical materials, they do a little bit of graphics and display, but for the most part, they're a mechanical distributor fabricator, and you might say a mechanical fabricator distributor, depending on what day of the week it is, because they're very well balanced. They do both. That's where I really was exposed to the mechanical world: nylon, acetyl, UHMW, a lot of really good suppliers. I was exposed to at Cope Plastics that I didn't really know much about when I joined them. Quadrant, which became Mitsubishi Chemical, Rochling, Sustaplast, at the time was a separate brand name, Artec, and of course Cast Nylons. And got to know the Cast Nylon product line initially through my experience at Cope Plastics. After working there for 6 years through 2009, opportunity came for me to join Cast Nylons, and I joined Cast Nylons in the fall of 2009. So I've been with them now, I guess, about 11 years. And in various roles, been vice president of sales, director of sales. Now at this stage of the game, I'm kind of on my glide path towards hopefully retirement in the near future. My title is director of sales with Cast Nylons, but I'm basically handling the Midwest, which is basically Missouri, Kansas, North Minnesota, North Dakota, and helping the new executive team transition. We've got a new COO. Kurt Brohl has replaced me as vice president of sales. Kurt worked for me for many years, had left the company, and we were able to hire Kurt back. And he joined and became vice president of sales, which allowed me to take a role that's more of a coaching role for the inside sales team and for the executive team. But my day-to-day duties really are just covering the Midwest now, working the Midwest territory for Cast Nylons and working with the channel partners that I've known in some cases for 30, 35 years. In the case of Aeromat, my first exposure with Aeromat was when I joined Cast Nylons in 2009. So I've been working with Aeromat now here for going on 11 years.
Wow. And I didn't mention it, but yeah, I do work for Aeromat Plastics, and we do distribute cast nylon products. So that's how I met you, and uh, we've had a great relationship since before I was here, and it's been nothing but good since then. So, and we've been working with you the whole time. So that's been great. Why don't we talk a little bit more about what Cast Nylons offers? First off, I think maybe at a base level, what is cast nylon and how does that compare to, say, extruded nylon? So your nylon 6 being cast and nylon 6/6 being your extruded. What's the difference? Maybe it's how they're manufactured or the mechanical properties. Can you talk a little bit about that for the people that don't know?
And they're both different, the mechanical properties and how they're manufactured. Cast nylon's been around for about 100 years. It's a chemical process. We start with chemicals that are the viscosity of water, and we put those chemicals together, which are catalysts and activators. And the key raw material is a chemical called caprolactam. We put all those chemicals together with their additives in kind of a hot soup. Caprolactam is maintained at about 180 degrees Fahrenheit in its preparatory form. If it's at room temperature, caprolactam is a solid. So we keep caprolactam at about 180, 185 degrees Fahrenheit. We add it with different catalyst activators, additives, pigments, and its viscosity, again, is like water and almost boiling water. As the catalysts and activators kick in, it starts to polymerize, creating a very, very long molecular weight chain. As it polymerizes, it turns from a very hot liquid, which sometimes goes up to as high as 300 degrees Fahrenheit when it's polymerizing. It polymerizes and then cools down, depending on the size of the casting. And, a typical plate or rod might take 20 to 30 minutes for it to go from its liquid state to its solid state. As it polymerizes, it shrinks, which allows us to demold it. So the shape that cast nylons ends up in is all about the mold. If it's going to be a rod, it's in a tube mold. If it's going to be a plate, it's pressed between two steel or aluminum plates. If it's going to be a tube, it's put, or what we call tubular bar, it's put into a tube with end caps, spun horizontally and through the centrifugal force. All the caprolactam obviously goes to the edges of the tool, and the idea of a tubular bar is created by pour weight. So an 8-inch tool for tubular bar could create an 8-inch OD, 7-inch ID. It could create an 8-inch OD, 4-inch ID. The idea is created by pour weight. So it's in the simplest form, it's a chemical reaction. Anywhere from 4 to 8 chemicals are involved, depending on what additives are involved. And it is put into a mold, kind of like baking a cake. It's going to take the shape of what mold you put it in or what process you put it in. Nylon 6, and by the way, cast nylon is considered, the generic name is polyamide 6. Cast nylon is a competitor, if you will, in some respects to extruded nylon. That's called polyamide 6/6. Polyamide 6/6 starts with caprolactam, and that is created into a resin, and then it is extruded in the traditional way. Many of the people in our industry are very familiar with extrusion technology. So there's a pre-step for making extruded nylon, and that's turning liquid caprolactam, which is its natural state when it's produced, into flake caprolactam, which is then turned into extruded pellets, and it is extruded. They're similar in nature in terms of mechanical properties, but cast nylon typically has a much longer molecular weight, therefore is a better mechanical material. Extruded's niche tends to be in very small diameter rod or very thin gauge sheet. For instance, today, and pricing is very difficult sometimes to put our hands on, but roughly speaking, 2-inch extruded rod, 2-inch cast rod are approximately the same price. If you're below 2-inch rod, typically extruded is less expensive. If you're above 2-inch rod, typically cast nylon is less expensive. Similarly on plate, 3/8 plate roughly is about the same price for cast and extruded. Under 3/8 plate, typically extruded is a little bit cheaper. Over 3/8 inch plate, typically cast nylon is extruded. At an extreme example, a 4-inch thick plate, cast nylon is typically about 1/8 the cost of extruded nylon. So, or the other way, extruded nylon is 8 times more expensive for a 4-inch thick plate. So their economies drive some of the application, but mechanical properties, when the pricing is similar, cast nylon is usually preferred because you've got the better mechanical properties. Also, because it is cast, there are better yield opportunities. If there's a large volume situation, we can make a custom tool that focuses on yield optimization. So that's an advantage that cast typically will have over extruded.
Wow, that's fascinating to hear. I mean, I guess I've seen that from our perspective on like the 2-inch down on the rod. We don't dabble too much with sheet that's an extruded at all. So that's fascinating to hear. You did mention previously about additives, and additives was one of the things that when I came to Aeromat, I wasn't all that familiar with nylon. I had been exposed to it to some degree with Nylatron from Quadrant and things like that. But it's fascinating to me to see all the different additives that could be added to cast nylon to make it a mechanically better product, or I guess to suit applications better. The one that kind of hits you in the face that seems like the most common one would be your MD or molybdenum sulfide filled cast nylons. Can you talk a little bit about the different types of additives you're putting in there and kind of the uses for them? We see a lot of use for that in heavy equipment and wear pads, and it's kind of eliminated in certain areas the need for grease zerks and things like that, which, you know, ultimately ends up being a huge cost saver. And it's replacing metal in a lot of places is what we're seeing, which is also pretty fascinating.
Right. That's absolutely true. I mean, nylon's real foray into the mechanical plastics arena and its successes were almost exclusively replacement of metal. Brass, aluminum, bronze, bushings, bearings of different types, wear pads. Metal being much more expensive, metal being much more heavy, nylon giving you better life cycles because of the different additives we have. The very primary cast nylon material, natural cast nylon, a white milky nylon, is FDA compliant. So you see a lot of the natural nylon in its basic state used in food processing related applications. The additives tend to bring into foray more the industrial and heavy equipment area. You know, there's really 3 common additives. The most popular by far, you've already mentioned, is molybdenum disulfide. What molybdenum disulfide brings to the table, it's often called a dry lubricant. But what it really does, it's not really a lubricant in that, but it does greatly increase the crystallinity of the cast nylon molecule. So it's got a much better compressive strength, a much better load bearing and wear properties than just simple natural cast nylon. So the first major additive of moly or MD or molybdenum disulfide was for the improved crystallinity, the improved wear properties and bearing properties in heavy duty industrial applications. Wear pads is very common. Shivs on construction cranes is very common. And this is, you know, an application that's literally around the world. We actually sell more molybdenum disulfide than we do natural. It's kind of an odd thing. It's about a 2-to-1 ratio. So we sell twice as much MD as we do natural. And it's a very common specified material. Again, generic specification, polyamide 6, MD filled or molybdenum disulfide filled is a very common specification for shivs and wear pads. You see that all over the world. But the idea of additives gave cast nylons some other opportunities. And cast nylons was the first one globally to put a oil additive, a wet oil additive into the nylon material. Our brand name Nyloil, registered trademark, is the first oil-filled nylon globally and really changed the world. And it also kind of created the concept that colors in cast nylon mean something. White was a natural, dark gray was moly filled, and green, a very distinct green, a very unique green, was the oil filled material. So we became pretty famous for oil filled, and that represents about 20% of our business today. It's a very common bushing and bearing material because it's continuously self lubricating. Other competitors have replicated a green nylon that has oil, but our oil-filled content is typically double our nearest competitors. We can put more oil into it and still end up with a cast nylon than a competitor. And there are limitations to the additives. You can't say, wow, the more oil, the better. Let's just keep adding more and more oil. Well, then you start affecting the polymerization and you don't get cast nylon. You get something totally different and it may not even totally polymerize properly. So we found the sweet spot of a maximum oil level, but still gives you a very good cast nylon material. And the Nyloil continuously self-lubricating. If you look at Nyloil under a microscope, you're going to see a very homogeneous dispersion of oil. Most of the time when you add additives to cast nylon, it becomes part of the molecule. When you add oil to cast nylon, it doesn't become part of the molecule. It stays oil, but it stays oil in very small microscopic droplets. So literally, as you're wearing the surface of the Nyloil finish over time through load, pressure, velocity, whatever, you're constantly releasing a little bit of oil. So you wear the nylon, you release oil, it prevents further wear of the nylon. It's kind of a very, very good positive cycle. Another additive, the third primary additive that we do have that's very common is wax. The same concept as a wet lubricant, which Nyloil is, wax filled, our GX material, and we also offer it in black, which is called BX, and also red, which is called RX. So we've got BX, GX, and RX, but GX is the most common. It's a light gray, and the solid lubricant has the same advantage of not really joining the molecule of cast nylon, but being a separate entity dispersed throughout the mass of the shape. Same properties of as the nylon wears, the wax lubricant self-lubricates. The issue then becomes, is your application better suited for a wet lubricant, Nyloil, or is it better suited for a dry lubricant, GX material? And it's basically a wax, a polyethylene type wax blend that is the lubricant in the solid GX material. That decision often gets to PVs, pressure and velocity ratios. It gets to load. It gets to RPMs. Generally speaking, if it's a heavy load, a static load that's going to be low RPMs, GX typically is the preferred material. If it's going to be a significant load but have higher RPMs or continuous RPMs or continuous high speeds, then the wet lubricant typically works better. And often we can help through our engineering department choose which one is going to work in your application if you know the speeds, the feeds, the pressure, the velocity, the ambient temperature. A lot of times people don't. So we'll just say, you know what, take some Nyloil, take some NiCast GX, put them in the application, see which one works best for you. There's no real difference in the price of the product. It's all about what works best in the application. So, but often, wear pads, you've got a customer in Omaha that has a high load wear pad that's static and is a good application for GX material. You also have an iteration of GX material in there, which is the last one I haven't talked about, which is SLX. And SLX is also used in wear pad applications. It's got both solid and wet lubricants in it. So so when you leave natural cast nylon, the first long-standing additive, molybdenum disulfide, really is all about high crystallinity, and that does affect some lubrication properties, but it's really about crystallinity. When you get into true lubrication properties, a wet lubricant, Nyloil, solid lubricant, GX, or a blend of both a wet and solid lubricant, SLX. And by the way, SLX is purple. So again, when you see colors in the nylon world, that's a grade identifier. It's not like back in the days when I was selling sinter, where there was red sinter and there was yellow sinter and there was green sinter, and they all did the same thing. Now, different colors for nylon mean different things.
Fascinating. So does the oil leach out of it at all? Is there a shelf life on oil-filled nylon, or?
There's not a shelf life per se, but nylon over time will get a little bit more crystalline. So that means it might have a little bit more surface hardness. The skin of the nylon might be a little bit more challenging to machine in that you got to go a little bit slower. You go too fast machining nylon and most plastics, they melt. So an older piece of nylon can be harder, and that can mean a little bit more crystallinity, and that can mean a little bit slower speed than feeds. But in terms of, does nylon go bad? No. Nylon we're often asked about the UV properties of nylon. Is nylon UV resistant? Well, from a mechanical point of view, yes. I mean, nylon can be used in exterior applications. We've seen nylon hold its properties in exterior applications for 4 or 5 years. So it's UV resistant from a mechanical property point of view. Is nylon UV resistant from a color point of view? No. Nylon will fade in exterior applications. A dark gray moly shiv is going to get a little lighter. A dark green nylon, a nylon bearing would get a little bit lighter. So it will be affected by UV from a color aesthetic point of view, but in terms of mechanical properties, which is what it's all about, we've got testing data that shows UV doesn't start affecting nylon from a mechanical property point of view, and 4 or 5 years out, and that's why it's often used as a shiv material. And we recently came across some applications where customers were unhappy because they had to replace their shivs that were 20 years old. And it was like, wow, 20 years is pretty long for a shiv. And again, a shiv in a crane application, that's the sacrificial animal. The most expensive part of that equation is the rope. So the shivs are designed to be replaced to protect the rope. And this customer had a 20-year life cycle on a shiv and was wondering why it went bad. So mechanical properties, exterior, no issues, but color, yeah, it's going to fade a little bit.
That's something that we've seen as well. I think that if you've worked with nylon for long enough, you've definitely seen if you put it outside for too long, it fades, but it still works. A lot of the parts that we make at Aeromat are in outdoor applications,
right?
And it's super common. Going back to Cast Nylons as a company, there's a few people in the States that make cast nylon. What sets Cast Nylons apart?
Well, first and foremost, we were founded by Jack Thorpe and his father 40 years ago. Jack's father actually was the capital behind the investment, and Jack joined the company 1 or 2 years in, and we're celebrating 40 years. So first and foremost, what makes us kind of unique is our owner, Jack Thorpe. Jack, I kind of coined the phrase Johnny Appleseed. He really, cast nylon applications were really in its infancy 40 years ago. There were people doing cast nylon in Europe that were a little bit more advanced and mature, but the U.S. market didn't really have any domestic producers for cast nylon. And Jack started the company in Cleveland, Ohio, and literally built it from the ground up, understanding the chemistry, understanding where you needed to buy additives, understanding the science behind molds and casting technology. And we say all we do is cast nylons. We are a very focused company and just produce cast nylons, but that's a mouthful because all we do is cast nylons. We make cast nylons 11 different ways. We have 11 different processing stages in our plant, depending on whether we're trying to make a plate, a rod, tubular bar, a custom near net shape, which is a common thing in the cast nylons world. We can make custom near net shapes, which are close to the finished part size to reduce machining time. So we have all these different processes, and yes, all we do is cast nylon, but there's a lot of different ways to make cast nylon, and there's a lot of chemistry involved, and chemistry of additives that are involved. So the two key things I think that make us unique in our industry is our owner, Jack Thorpe, who in his Johnny Appleseed role has been around every step of the way and is still involved in the business today. And the fact that we have a single product line focus. We often say it's our strength and it's our weakness. It's our strength in that not too many people do cast nylons as good as us. It's our weakness in that, to a channel partner like yourselves, we don't have other materials, which at times can be distracting. For instance, I hear a lot about what's going on in the acetyl market, and I'm glad we're not in the acetyl market. And there's been times I've been glad we're not in the UHMW market, because those markets are different animals. So it's a limiting factor in terms of our value as a distributor compared to some of our competitors, which are billion-dollar companies with 20 product lines. We are less than $100 million company with one product line. And but at the end of the day, that often really truly becomes a strength, because we're very focused. And if it's a cast nylon application, we're your partner. And if it's not, we're going to tell you. We're going to tell you that, no, that one probably is best for UHMW, or that one's probably best for acetyl, or that one's probably best for PEEK, which are the materials, or Delrin, the materials that people leave cast nylons to use. But people also come from those same materials to cast nylons for a variety of reasons. From UHMW, for instance, because they need better temperature properties, better load bearing properties, a stronger bearing material, versus acetyl because they need better impact resistance, better wear, versus PEEK because they don't need 500 degrees operating temperatures. 250 to 300 degrees works just fine. We often take applications from other plastics and lose them to other plastics, typically on price or properties. But our focus as the one product line guy, if it's a nylon opportunity, we're your partner. And that allows us to do things like near net shapes, like custom formulations. We have a 30-year cast nylon industry veteran on our team by the name of Bernd Neusdorfer. He's our chief technology officer. And Bernd is often involved in application development, and at times also in custom formulation development or custom near net shape development. A lot more work goes into it when you get into the area of custom near net shape or custom formulations. But for us and the channel partner, it becomes a very difficult competitive landscape for anybody to take that business away from us. Because if we get in on the front end and help develop the right nylon for the right application and optimize it from a yield point of view and from a price point of view and from a machining point of view, that becomes a very tough competitive landscape for others to try and take that business away from us.
Absolutely. Absolutely. And so now, Jim, you guys only manufacture in the United States, right? So this is just a completely American-made product. I think this is something you've brought up in the past, and to us, that's important. As one of your channel partners here at Aeromat, that's a really important point for us.
Correct.
Talk a little bit about that. I don't know if you're still able to be sourcing all your caprolactam from the United States or not, but that was also a key differentiator for a long time. And I think there was some cost issues going on, but I'm not sure how that wound out for you guys. So could you talk a little bit more about that?
Sure. We're one of 4 domestic producers, and it's been that way my entire career with the company. There's only been 4 domestic producers. And I think the reason that while importers have attacked the market at different times over those 11 years, we've never had anybody invest into a plant in the North American market, because I do believe we do a really, really good job in the North American market of defending our market position and our market share. We're of the 4 domestic producers, we're the only one. And when I say domestic, I'm really counting US and Canada, because one of the producers is Canadian owned. But the other 2 producers are large European corporation owned. And so of the domestic producers, we're the only one that's US owned. And that has come into play in military application, where we can, as a US owned company, can do things for the government that other cast nylon companies can't, because they're not able to get the certifications as being foreign owned. The caprolactam situation, again, key raw material, often 80–90% of the raw material involved in cast nylon production. There's only 2 producers of that in North America. It's kind of an oligopoly, and they are pretty good about somehow magically coordinating price. So we have on the buy side of our key raw material, we have a difficult situation in that there's only 2 suppliers domestically, and they obviously don't have any major incentive to get into a price war with each other. Yet On the buy side of the equation, we've got lots of competition, so we have to be very, very aggressive. So we're kind of caught in the middle on that caprolactam situation. However, we have developed technologies and we have developed capabilities to buy caprolactam outside the United States. There are logistical headaches, but it does free us up the global price of caprolactam, which is typically a little bit lower. And it gives us some leverage that we do control our future, because chemical plants have force majeure. Chemical plants have natural disasters. And unfortunately, we're going through one right now down there in Lake Charles, Louisiana, with a chemical plant on fire. So, we've got ourselves protected and our supply chain protected by the ability to get caprolactam on a global basis, which does help us domestically on price, and to get caprolactam on a global basis, which helps us to prevent force majeure. We've never had an interruption in service. We've always been able to supply the market regardless of what's going on in the world of caprolactam. And part of the limitations of caprolactam is that it has to be stored in liquid format at 180 degrees. However, as an alternate to force majeure, we also have the technology where we could buy flake and melt flake. It's an added step and added cost. We don't want to do it. But in the earliest days of cast nylons, when we made very, very small batches, we used flake. So we can go back to the old way of using flake, which now you're expanding it to, warehouses all around the globe that have all the caprolactam flake that you could possibly want. But again, we went to liquid because of our scale. We can do, we buy caprolactam in, 4,000 gallon tanker trucks, and bring them in, multiple trucks a day at times, and throughout the week. The advantages, because we have melt processing units, are batch sizes that can be up to 2,500 gallons. So you're talking about very, very large melt processing units, very, very large batch sizes. And we have probably about a $2.5 million investment in our plant just in caprolactam material handling capabilities and melt processing unit. So it's an advantage to have that economy of scale. And but again, the caprolactam world, there is a little bit of risk there. So we've done I think a good job at hedging our bets. We can buy it globally, we can buy it domestically, and we can also convert to flake if we have to. It's just an intermediary step. But we feel like we've got a good handle on the caprolactam side of the equation right now.
Great. So now we're going to get to the really important part. How do people find your product? How do they buy it? I'd be remiss to say you can't come to Aeromat or contact me. You can find me on LinkedIn. You'll probably see this video in one of those various places, but everywhere else, where can people go to find cast nylons? How do they find you? How do they start getting this product into,
One of our advantages is our company name is Cast Nylon, and we make cast nylon. That's kind of the advantage of being one of the first in the market, 40 years ago. So we do get hits from the internet, just people saying, cast nylon, what is cast nylon? And we'll come up in those searches. The fact of the matter is our business is almost exclusively 100% focused through our channel partners. And so we're working with the IAPD, International Association of Plastics Distributors, channel partners. We've got all the best distributors in North America, and that includes Canada and Mexico, that are in the mechanical market. So we look at our channel partners as our sales and marketing arm. We are doing more on things like LinkedIn. We are doing more vertical marketing, known applications where we have success with one customer with our channel partner, and then we say, okay, who else does similar work to that successful application? And we've got a pretty exhaustive web page with all of our literature, all of our certifications, our sales territory maps, lots of technical support through the website. So, but first and foremost, our number one marketing focus has always been our channel partners, and working with our channel partners and doing things at the local level to make sure that we're calling on the people that have industrial wear and bear applications to see what the cast nylon opportunities might be.
Jim, what is your website? It's Cast Nylon, right? CastNylon.com, not with an S.
Yeah, not with an S.
You're putting that
That'll
in,
get
you're going to the wrong place. I've been down that road
you're
a couple
going
too
to the
many
wrong
times.
place. It's just CastNylon.com.
And if people go there, can they find channel partners? Can they contact you somehow if they're from a
Yes, they
different
can.
region than the Midwest or Minnesota,
They,
where I'm at?
right, they can contact us, and then we will reach out to them and find out what their application is, what their need is, where they are, because we really do want to direct traffic with somebody contacting us looking for a distributor, because let's just face it, there's different levels of partnership out there. We've got strategic partners out there like Aeromat, and we've got transactional partners out there who will buy from us, but maybe they buy from other people. And then we've got competitive distributors out there that maybe the customer might know about and think they can get our product from them. So we like to get involved. We like to have live interaction with the customer, find out what their application is, what their need is, where they're located. And then we basically try and make sure we direct that to our more loyal strategic partners.
Excellent. Jim, thank you so much for taking the time to sit down today. I'm sure a lot of people are going to find this pretty interesting because I learned a lot. So thank you so much for taking the time, man, to just kind of enlighten us all on the worlds of cast nylons.
My pleasure, and thank you very much for the business. I appreciate the support at Aeromat.